This is Andi Purewal for ID Boxing. I'm joined by trainer Ben Davison here at the Matchroom Gym. Ben, I wouldn't say unfamiliar surroundings. I'm sure you've been here previously for sparring experiences, but it's not your gym. So how are you, firstly?
I'm good, thanks, mate. You?
All good. Obviously, we've just seen Royston there getting some rounds in with Joe Cordina. Very entertaining spar. Just your takeaway from that.
Yeah, fantastic, invaluable experience for Royston. Joe's a brilliant world champion, and I class him as a world champion, you know, with the circumstances and that. And I'm sure he will be two-time world champion very shortly. So it's invaluable experience, and they talk after the sparring and both take things away from it. So you know, I'm only up the road from Tony, so as often as we can, we'll always help each other out.
I mean, the Shavkat Rakhimov fight for Joe Cordina is only a matter of weeks away now. We saw how successful Zalfa Barrett was up until the point of a stoppage in that fight. How do you fancy Joe's chances to become that two-weight world champion?
Yeah, it's different though, isn't it? I think Zalfa, he did have success, but at what cost? I think that showed down the line. I think Joe will have success, but will be able to maintain that for 12 rounds if that's what it needs to be. But I wouldn't be surprised if Joe did end up getting him out of there, if I'm honest.
Just to kind of link back to your fighters this past weekend, we saw your Fabio Wardley, your heavyweight charge, defeat Michael Coffie. Just your takeaway from his performance as well.
Yeah, well, I assist with Fabio. Obviously, Rob is his coach, but you know, I think everybody was a bit surprised. I think everybody thought it was a dangerous fight. People that sort of knew Michael Coffie and some of his previous wins, etc., and what he's capable of. So I think a lot of people were surprised. You know, it was a good win. Good performance. I do think the stoppage was slightly premature, but at the same time, for the referees, you know, there was about 4 or 5 clean punches that landed at the end there, and if 2 more had landed and he had ended up slept on the floor, then people would have said too late. So I'm not saying that he was right in that exact moment, but I'm saying it's a very hard job to get that timing exactly right every single time. You know, if they're too late, people are kicking and screaming that it's just their duty of care to look after the boxers, and if they're a little bit too early, then they're criticised. So, you know, it was slightly premature, but at the same time, you know, they're not going to get it bang on every time, and I can understand why the ref stepped in, probably anticipating a few more clean shots landed from where I was sitting. It looked that way, and, you know, with the big boys, anything can happen, but you know, I thought it was a good performance. There was a few things specifically that we worked on that played out, and he listened to instructions. Bar in the end now, I thought it was a little bit of a. I think finishing needs to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit more efficient. But overall, I thought it was a really good performance.
That was something I wanted to touch on. I spoke to Fabio yesterday and I raised the point to him. I think a lot of people would have been interested to see how he would have fared maybe a couple rounds on if that flurry didn't result in the ref stopping the fight. What do you make of that? Was it been something you'd be interested in?
I understand what you're saying. I think in a different type of fight it could have had a factor, but I think in the way that fight was playing, the tempo that it's being played out at, I don't think it would have been a massive factor, if I'm honest. But 100%, you know, I totally agree with you that the finishing needs to be a bit more efficient and a bit more, a little bit cleaner.
David Adelaide turned up to the press conference, called him out. Fraser Clark has had his back and forth with Fabio since the fight and before the fight as well. What would you like to see next for Fabio?
I don't know, you know, I don't deal with all that for Fabio. I mean, we'll discuss potential opponents, but until there are potential opponents that are mentioned, you know, I know that I think, to be fair to him, I think Fraser said he's happy to come across to the zone and to make that work. Them 2 guys sparred at my gym previously. That's a great fight. Adelaide as well. That's a great fight, but I don't know what the situation will be there with the BT Sports and the zone situation. So until, you know, there's a bit more detail onto what it looks like to be next, I won't really look into it too much.
Headline event also for heavyweight Anthony Joshua returning to winning ways against Jermaine Franklin. What did you make of his performance, Ben?
I thought he's had a long time out of the ring, first fight under a new coach. You know, a hell of a lot of pressure on his shoulders as well for something that a lot of people don't take into consideration. I think he's actually a partner at DAZN now, and a big part of that UK market is based upon Anthony Joshua and the subscribers and everything that he brings to that market. So hell of a lot of pressure on him. It was good to see him back in the ring and get back to winning ways. So I'm sure it'll be steps in the right direction from here on.
Going into the fight, Ben, all the talk was of seeing that destructive version of Anthony Joshua return. A lot of people felt that we might see him stop Jermaine Franklin, and in the post-fight kind of analysis, people commenting, suggesting that maybe he's just too worried, too nervous about what's coming back at him. Do you feel like that's the case with Anthony when you're watching?
I think you have to look at what was happening in the fight as well. There was a lot of big lulls in the action, which Franklin was often returning Anthony Joshua's jab, which I think may have made Anthony Joshua think twice about throwing that jab, because Franklin was looking to counter it so often. But that's something for him and his team to look at and say, you know, how can we work our way around that next time? And it's part of developing. And you know, there's probably things in the fight that he's looking at and working on that we would have been unaware of. But look, steps in the right direction. It's back to winning ways, like I said, and I'm sure there'll be progress from there. But you know, I'd like to see a couple more of those types of fights around that level, build himself back up. And I think that it won't be long before we see him back to at the top of the tree.
Just a final one on him, then. Would you dismiss anybody who suggested that there's a confidence issue within AJ?
Would I dismiss it? I don't know. I don't know. Like, I haven't spoke to him enough to have that conversation or that assessment. I think that he would be able to answer that more so than me.
That's fair enough, Ben. Just moving away from AJ, obviously we saw the news yesterday that Amir Khan had failed a UKAD test in the immediate aftermath of his defeat to Cal Brook last year. What were your thoughts when you saw that news break?
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Obviously it's a shame. I don't know the ins and outs to comment too much on it. I know that Amir said that, you know, he doesn't quite understand how it's happened. Why it took so long to come out, I don't know. And I know there was a lot of talk about that means that the promoters and the board would have known, but they're saying that they didn't know either. So, yeah, it's a bit of a messy situation, to be honest.
What's your thoughts on that? Because you would have assumed that usually everybody involved within that kind of fight, so Amir, Cal, the board, obviously the promoters as well, would have all found out. Ben Shalom come out saying that he only found out via social media yesterday when he broke. Robert Smith apparently only found out the night before. Why do you think that it's come about this way?
It's a question for UKAD, isn't it? It's a question for UKAD or whoever it was, whatever company it was that done the testing. So I don't know. I know that the board and Robert Smith have said that they was made aware of an adverse finding or something like that. But again, what can the board do until UKAD have said to the board, okay, this is why it is, this is the situation, this is a scenario. The board can't go and say, right, we're going to fine you or ban you straight away because we know there's an adverse finding, because UKAD may come back and say, you know, there was something wrong with our testing, or it was this, or it was that, or actually, I don't know. The board obviously have to await the confirmation and final decision or outcome from UKAD. So, difficult situation for all involved, but again, I think that questions need to be asked to UKAD, as similar, I believe, that questions need to be asked to VADA in the Conor Benn situation. So maybe we need to look at that, you know, how accessible are the people at these agencies to ask these questions? Maybe not to everybody and every journalist and every company, but maybe for the promoters to ask these questions of, or a representative, I don't know.
Ben, Amir's obviously had a hugely successful career, amateur and pro. How much of a stain does this bring to it now?
I don't know, because again, don't know the ins and outs. I wouldn't, you know, it's a shame. I try to be positive, and I'm hopefully not gonna look at it every time I see Amir Khan look at this situation. But yeah, you know, he's done some great things. I just hope it finds out that there has, in some way, been a misunderstanding or whatever it is. I don't know, or an accident.
Just a final few from me, Ben. Obviously, we had that disappointing news that Fury-Usyk fell through the other week. As somebody who used to work with Tyson, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs. I think social media doesn't help. You know, it ended up both parties constantly going onto social media with comments about the fight and etc. etc. But you know, again, I like to stay positive, and I like to think that hopefully we will still see that fight.
Looking at how it all fell out, a lot of people felt that it was Tyson who came out looking the worst of the two. Again, somebody who knew him personally. What did you make of kind of all of the demands coming out and how Alexander seemed to accept a certain amount up until he got to that point where he said, no more, it's either this or nothing.
Yeah, so from my understanding of the situation, it was a case of Tyson wanted, or Usyk wanted a flip reverse of 70-30. Tyson said 50-50, just meet in the middle at 60-40. Like, that's how negotiations work a lot of the time if you really want to get something done. So again, I don't know. I haven't asked the questions to people and to promoters of what happened there, etc. That's their business to deal with, and I'm sure if they felt like they could have got it done, we would have got it done. So it's just a shame that we haven't got it right now, but again, hopefully down the line we do get to see it.
Ben John Ryder's just gone for a shower there. You've just seen him, might have caught the last of him sparring, in fact. He gets ready to face Canelo-Alvarez, somebody you previously were somewhat in the corner of with Billy Joe Saunders when he challenged him. How do you fancy John's chances? A big ask, obviously going out to Mexico as well, but how do you fancy John's chances to cause the upset?
Yeah, look, he's going up against one of the pound for pound, or at some point was the pound for pound best fighter in the world. John's a strong guy, can really whack, so you've got to give him a chance there. He's a really tough guy, durable guy. You know, I expect John to look to try and take the fight into the later part of it. But he's, you know, I'm a big fan of John Ryder as a man and as a fighter. So, you know, I'm a big fan of Canelo as well. So may the best man win.
It's obviously Canelo's first fight back in Mexico for some time now. I know people don't like to say being kind of the away fighter will play a difference, but with that being back in his home country rather, do you think that if John's going to be successful, he needs to go and somehow produce something better than what Dimitri Bivol did? Because we saw how tight those scorecards were when many felt Dimitri had been successful by a wider margin.
Yeah, I haven't sat back and watched that fight properly to score it, Bivol and Canelo, and often there's a perception of how a fight has played out or how it should be scored, and sometimes I don't always agree with that. So to have an opinion on that, I think I'd have to go back and score that fight and have a look at it. But in terms of for John, I think it's really difficult to go into a fight already pre-planning bad scorecards. You just can't do that. So you have to prepare for what it is that you feel you need to do to win the fight. I'm sure that's what him and Tony will be doing.
Ben, Mr. Billy Joe Saunders, what is the latest with him?
Yeah, he's been in the gym this week. He's training. I think he's anticipating a comeback around September time. So he has been training. So we'll see.
Who would you see as kind of a comeback for him? I imagine it would be a very slow return for him, but you might disagree, you might have other plans.
I don't know. Again, I haven't asked that business. Personally, I would like to see one or two, you know, tick overs coming back. Probably need that to get his weight back down to where he wants to be competing at along the way. So, yeah, you know, not at the highest level. A couple of international opponents or something, and then, you know, hopefully a big fight from there with whoever's around at the time.
Ben, it has been a while since he was back in the ring. Is obviously 2021 when he fought Canelo. Does he want to return to super middleweight?
I think so. Yeah, I think light heavyweight. You know, he's not the biggest super middleweight in the world. In terms of frame, he's wide, but in terms of frame, he's not the biggest. So, but stylistically as well, I think that giving away that much size advantage at light heavyweight, I don't think would suit.
Will he be not necessarily easy, but do you think he'll be able to get back down to right on the back of his inactivity period?
I think so. His weight's not great, but sensible. A lot more sensible than it was anyway. So, yeah, you know, and he's a gritty MF, Billy Joe. So he will, you know, he'll put the work in and really graft to get himself to where he needs to be to get back to that weight.
Saved me a job of needing to censor that word there, Ben. Just a final one. Obviously, we had the fight announced the other day. Your man Lara-Wood re-enters the ring against Maurizio Lara. Rematch immediate come May 27th. You said at the time, well, you said and Lee said at the time you wanted it. Was the plan still the same? Nothing changed within the gym. It had to be Maurizio Lara next.
Yeah, Lee was absolutely desperate for it. There was at the beginning there was an option to maybe let Lara and Warrington fight. I didn't mind that option. Lee was against that option. However, the WBA then come out and said that they was going to order Komatov. So, you know, the situation there sort of pushed our hand to do the fight the immediate rematch, which, you know, I'm not against it. Like, I think there's a clear path to victory for Lee there that people can see from the first fight, and it's one that I'm confident that he'll be able to pull off as well.
People question that when Josh Warrington returned against Lara, would he have demons in the kind of back of his mind, on the back of what happened in that first fight? Lee Wood, granted, was boxing brilliantly up until the point of the stoppage. Will that play on his mind at all, what happened in the end?
No, I don't think so. If anything, I think it will actually work in his favour, in a sense that, okay, I can't get complacent, I can't get carried away, I need to be disciplined. It needs to be a disciplined performance to maintain what it is that I need to be doing to have the success that he was having. So I think it could work in his favour, if I'm honest.
Right, Ben, I know that Royston probably somewhere waiting for you now so you can shoot off, so I appreciate this time. Safe travels back to the other side of London, thank you.
No problem, mate.